The quiet cowboy who rode off with every heart on Saturday nights had a secret life no one saw coming. He starred in 50 shoot 'em ups and always rescued the town. Yet behind those steel blue eyes grew mysteries that rattled Hollywood. Whispers spread about his odd marriage to a wife who lived hundreds of miles away. Reporters gasped when they learned he shared a sunny beach house with another famous leading man. Years later, when death finally saddled up and carried him away, stunned relatives opened his files and dropped to their knees. He had stashed a fortune so huge it flipped their world upside down. Randolph Scott was born on a chilly January 23rd, 1898, in Orange County, Virginia, but even his birth held a twist. He was the only child in his clan not delivered in Charlotte, North Carolina, because the family was simply visiting cousins that day. Every one of his 5 brothers and sisters breathed their first cries back in Charlotte. His father, George Grant Scott, was no plain bookkeeper. He became the very first certified public accountant in North Carolina, breaking new ground while running the textile numbers. His mother, Lucille, carried old money and deep respect across the Carolinas. That meant Randolph arrived with both brains and bankroll, wrapped in proud Scottish roots that lifted the family's name in Southern circles. The Scotts lived in a roomy Charlotte mansion that still stands tall under swaying oaks today. By 1927, they upgraded again, moving into a grand house crafted by famous architect Louise Asbury, turning heads on every street corner. Private schools polished Randolph's manners like bright silver. He attended Woodbury Forest in Virginia, a training ground where sons of the rich learned to lead. There he picked up calm confidence, perfect posture, and the feeling nothing was out of reach. Yet he was no soft armchair scholar. On fields and in pools he charged ahead, smashing football tackles, swinging baseball bats, slicing through water lanes, and thundering over fences on horseback. These pricey sports sharpened the very skills that later made him a natural in Wild West films. He even suited up for Georgia Tech, dreaming of all-American glory, until a brutal back injury slammed that door shut. Determined, he packed his bags to the University of North Carolina to study textile engineering, following Dad's safe path. Strange fate waited. The same riding tricks and sure aim he learned for fun would soon turn him into Hollywood's most believable cowboy. Cameras did not need to fake anything. Randolph already rode like the wind. Growing up, he performed in plays run by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, shows heavy with Southern pride. There he polished an easy, aristocratic accent that later melted into every line he spoke on screen. The old culture trained him to stand tall, speak little, and hide pain, traits that glued audiences to his silent strength. While many young men scrambled for work after World War I, Randolph enjoyed a safety net thick as a quilt. Powerful family friends watched over him. Among them was the one surprise that changed everything: a letter of introduction to the electric mogul Howard Hughes. In April 1917, America jumped into war, and 19-year-old Randolph jumped with it. He enlisted in the National Guard that July, rose to corporal by October, and marched onward as a sergeant by February. His father tried steering him toward West Point, but Randolph craved real action. Across the Atlantic, he joined the 2nd Trench Mortar Battalion on the screaming front lines of France. Inside cramped dugouts, he and one partner whispered prayers over pocket testaments, then called out deadly numbers that aimed the big guns. One slip could wipe out whole squads, so he worked with ice-cold focus. He rarely spoke about the horror he saw in shell-torn fields, yet the pressure etched a rock-solid calm into his soul. Back home, that calm lit up the screen. Viewers believed him because battle had already carved a hero inside him. War also taught practical talents producers loved. Randolph galloped through mud on sturdy horses, cleaned rifles in rain, and lunged with bayonets as smoke rose around him. Later, when directors shouted action, he needed no double. He could do it all himself. Armistice came in November 1918, but Randolph lingered in France, attending artillery officer school at Saumur. By May 1919, he wore the bars of a second lieutenant. When he finally sailed home, he chased a brand new dream: college football greatness at Georgia Tech. He pledged a fraternity and threw every ounce into gridiron drills until that old back injury roared again. Dream over. So he transferred to University of North Carolina, dug into engineering books, but the quiet hallways could not match the thunder he had known in trenches and stadiums. Next, he joined his father's textile firm, tallying ledgers, checking audits, and managing offices with strict discipline. Yet deep inside, boredom gnawed. Numbers felt too small for a man who had peered over crater rims at dawn. In 1927, he slammed shut the account books and took a daring leap toward uncertainty. 2 years later, while teeing off at the Los Angeles Country Club, fate swung its club too. A starter paired him with none other than Howard Hughes, the eccentric flyer, movie king, and billionaire inventor. During 18 holes, Hughes watched the tall Southerner crush drives with effortless grace. By the final green, he leaned over and offered Randolph a tiny part in his upcoming film, The Far Call. It was uncredited, almost invisible, yet it flung open Hollywood's heavy door. Randolph knew good looks alone would not carry him forever. He enrolled at the Pasadena Community Playhouse, the finest acting school on the West Coast. Day after day, he trained his voice, refined every stride, and stretched emotion across bright stage lights. Future legends like Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman would later walk those same boards. Hollywood insiders could not stop gossiping about the beach house he split with matinee idol Cary Grant. Paparazzi camped outside the whitewashed walls all summer, hoping to snap the two stars tossing footballs in the surf or grilling steaks at sunset. Rumors flew. Letters were written. But Randolph just tipped his hat and drove away in his polished Packard, refusing to feed the frenzy. That cool silence only made fans lean closer, convinced there had to be more hidden behind that steady gaze. The boy born in borrowed rooms, raised in marble halls, and forged in muddy foxholes had now carved a brand-new trail. Each lesson, each setback, each silent prayer in France stacked together until cameras finally rolled, and a Western titan thundered across silver screens. Hollywood spotlight snapped onto Randolph Scott in 1931, when legendary director Cecil B. DeMille slipped into a small theater and caught him stealing the show. DeMille leaned over and whispered, "That young man has something Hollywood can't teach," and those words rocketed through every casting office like a starter pistol. Producers scrambled for meetings, and Scott's days as a lucky golfer were suddenly over. But what happened next was even more surprising. That same season, filming on the Western Drama Virginian almost derailed because star Gary Cooper could not master a true Virginia drawl. Panic raced through trailers until someone remembered a real Virginian nearby, Randolph Scott, uncredited and unpaid. He drilled Cooper line by line, even marking tricky vowels on cue cards. Critics later cheered Cooper's accent, never guessing quiet coach standing just off camera. Producers admitted the film might have flopped without Scott's rescue, yet he slipped back into the shadows, happy to let Cooper shine. Momentum thundered into 1932. Paramount Pictures signed Scott to a glittering contract and hurled him into Hot Saturday beside Nancy Carroll and a then-unknown Cary Grant. On screen, the drama sizzled, but off-screen an even hotter friendship formed. Scott and Grant joked between takes, discovered a mutual love of golf, and soon rented a Malibu beach house where waves lapped at their back porch. Magazines buzzed, paparazzi camped outside the gate, and rumors claimed they surfed at dawn, sped down Pacific Coast Highway in convertibles by noon, and challenged each other to chess duels after sunset. Yet they never missed a single call time. During these heady days, Scott's roles multiplied like firecrackers. His 6'2" frame, warm smile, and gentle southern drawl drew directors like moths. By 1930, for he was no longer background decoration, he played steadfast pals, charming scoundrels, and steely rivals. Reviewers wrote that the temperature seemed to drop whenever he entered a scene because his calm confidence cooled the air. Then Hollywood gasped again when Scott wed Marion DuPont Somerville on March 23, 1936. She was horse racing royalty and granddaughter of the DuPont dynasty, while he was the screen's rising knight. Their ceremony stayed so secret even gossip columnists missed it for months, whispering that romance blossomed after Scott served as best man at her first wedding. Yet cracks had beneath the satin. Marion remained at Montpelier, her 55-room Virginia palace once owned by President James Madison, while Scott worked dawn to dusk in California. She even dug a pit in her basement gym so the towering actor could lift weights without hitting the ceiling, but geography still tore them apart. In 1938, her horse battleship shocked England by winning the Grand National Steeplechase, and Scott alone attended the victory banquet. After 3 quiet years, the couple separated in 1939. No fights, no scandal, just lives heading different ways. Childless yet respectful, Marion kept the Scott name until her passing in 1983. Even before that split, the press went wild over Bachelor Hall. In 1935, Scott and Cary Grant moved into a 5,500-square-foot Spanish villa on the Malibu Bluffs, where sea breezes rattle French doors all night. Studios staged photo shoots of the pair lifting dumbbells and matching trunks, while columnist Hedda Hopper cracked jokes and Carol Lombard teased that Scott paid the bills while Grant mailed them. Their antics became legend, like the day Grant balanced on the roof to fix a loose tile while Scott shouted script lines to keep him laughing. They lived side by side for 12 years, and the arrangement only in 1944, after studio pressure, pushed both men into separate marriages. Yet their bond never broke. Back on sound stages, Scott conquered genre after genre. In 1936, he danced through swing time with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, traded wisecracks with Mae West, then roamed the wilderness as Hawkeye in The Last of the Mohicans. He nearly claimed Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, losing the role at the final casting bell, and still squeezed in Roberta, Pittsburgh, and Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Critics raved that he could flip from silk to steel in a single cut. By the early 1940s, he tightened his saddle straps and settled into Western for good. Directors adored his discipline. Michael Curtiz declared, "Scott was the only gentleman I've met in this business," a line that spread through studio canteens like gospel. Journalists filled columns with tales of his quiet kindness, including the afternoon he bought ice cream cones for every crew member during a brutal heat wave, then returned to filming without asking for thanks. 2 pictures sealed his legend. The Last of the Mohicans electrified 1936 audiences with 92 minutes of arrows and waterfalls, crowning Scott's Hawkeye a fearless hero with a tender core. 3 years later, Jesse James stampeded into theaters, and Scott Steadfast will write role beside Tyrone Power and Henry Fonda. The film earned over $2.3 million, trailing only Gone with the Wind and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington that year, and a risky horse stunt sparked public outcry that led to new rules protecting animals on set. War clouds gathered, yet Scott's spirit never dimmed. He tried to enlist in the Marines, but his old back injury barred him, so he grabbed another way to serve. With comedian Joe DeRita, he raced from base to base, cracking jokes for soldiers who needed laughter more than sleep, and he turned his own ranch into a government food farm. On screen, he lifted morale with rousing hits like The Shores of Tripoli, Bombardier, Corvette K, 225, and Gung Ho, becoming a living symbol of American strength. War Department officials later sent personal letters praising the thunder of his voice across remote outposts. Finally, in 1944, the restless cowboy found lasting peace by marrying actress Patricia Stillman. Their union withstood wars, studio shakeups, and the slow fade of the big-screen Western, stretching more than 4 decades until Scott's final curtain in 1987. He proved that a silver-screen hero could indeed ride into a sunset built to last. Randolph Scott never chased headlines, but his real life held more heart than most of Hollywood's biggest love stories. He and Patricia Stillman adopted 2 children, Christopher and Sandra, and while other celebrity marriages crumbled in the spotlight, their home stayed peaceful and private. That calm, stable life gave Scott something rare in Tinseltown, genuine happiness. Behind the scenes, Scott also played smart. In the late 1940s, he teamed up with producer Harry Joe Brown to launch their own company, Ran-On Productions, a name that fused Randolph and Brown. Back then, actors didn't get to call the shots. Studios owned the scripts, the casting, and even the paycheck. But not Scott. With Ran-On, he chose his own films, focused on westerns, and gained full creative control, plus a much bigger cut of profits. This move shaped the most powerful chapter of his career. In 1946, Bad Man's Territory thundered into theaters. Scott played lawman Mark Rowley, facing off against dangerous outlaws like Jesse James and the Dalton Gang. The film raked in $557,000 in profit, huge numbers for that time. It earned 2 sequels and turned Scott into a guaranteed box office hit. But the real shocker came between 1950 and 1953. Randolph Scott, a cowboy star in his 50s, broke into America's top 10 most popular male actors and stayed there for 4 straight years. That kind of streak was rare for any actor, but for a Western star, almost unheard of. And he wasn't just famous, he was rich. By 1950, Scott was earning $100,000 per film, equal to over $1.3 million today. Audiences couldn't get enough. From big cities to small towns, families lined up to watch his calm, silent brand of justice. His fans ranged from wide-eyed kids to hardened ranchers. He wasn't just a movie star. He became a symbol. And it wasn't just about the money or the fame. It was about how he told stories. In Trail Street, 1947, Scott became Bat Masterson, a serious lawman sent to clean up a lawless Kansas town. It was packed with action, heart, and brought in $365,000 in profit. That same year in Gunfighters, he played a haunted man who had just killed his best friend. The role was quiet, aching, and full of depth. Then in The Walking Hills, 1949, he led a harsh desert treasure hunt that mixed Western grit with film noir mystery. It was dusty, tense, and unforgettable. And in all of them, Scott stood at the center, stoic, steady, and deeply human. As the roles got deeper, so did his face. By the late 40s, Randolph Scott no longer looked like the clean-cut hero. The sun had weathered his skin. The wind had cut lines across his face. He looked like a man who'd seen hard times, and it worked. That toughened look reminded people of old silent stars like William S. Hart, and it made Scott more believable than ever. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need big speeches. A single look said it all. Then came the most important stretch of his entire career. Between 1956 and 1960, Scott made 7 unforgettable westerns with director Bud Boetticher. These weren't loud, expensive blockbusters. They were sharp, simple, and full of meaning. Each one tore down the old cowboy myths and replaced them with something more real. Tough men with deep regrets, lonely roads, and hard choices. These 7 films, 7 Men from Now, The Tall T, Decision at Sundown, Buchanan Rides Alone, Westbound Ride Lonesome, and Comanche Station, would come to be known as the Ranone cycle. In 7 Men from Now, Scott played a man haunted by guilt. His wife had been murdered during a robbery. Because he'd refused to take a lesser job out of pride, she took it instead and paid with her life. That guilt followed him like a shadow. Lee Marvin played a charming but dangerous outlaw who mirrored Scott's darker side. Their showdown wasn't just about guns. It was about pain. And even after the final shot, Scott's character still carried that pain. The ending wasn't a victory. It was a burden. A year later, the Tall T dug even deeper. Scott's character, Pat Brennan, tried to trade candy with a bull in one of the film's quietest scenes. That small moment said everything. This wasn't just a cowboy. He was thoughtful, patient, a man who used words before weapons. The plot threw him into a hostage standoff with ruthless killers and one innocent woman. But the real tension wasn't the guns. It was the choices. Could he save her? Could he trust anyone? Every decision cut like a knife. That's why The Tall T is now part of the National Film Registry. By 1959, Ride Lonesome delivered one of Scott's most painful characters, Ben Brigade, a bounty hunter on a personal mission. He didn't want a reward. He wanted revenge. Years earlier, his wife had been kidnapped and killed. So he captured the killer's brother, not for justice, but as bait. In the final scene, Brigade burns the very tree where his wife had been hanged. That fire wasn't just flames. It was grief, rage, and the start of healing. Then came Comanche Station in 1960, Scott's last Western before retirement. It was the perfect send-off. He played Jefferson Cody, a man who had spent 10 years searching for his missing wife. When he rescued another woman from the Comanches, he hoped, just maybe, it was her. But it wasn't. Still, he kept his promise to protect her and bring her home. In the final shot, Cody rides off alone, still searching, still hoping. That was Scott's farewell. Heroes don't always win. Sometimes they just keep riding. 2 years later, Ride the High Country arrived with little fanfare. It was just another low-budget Western. Sam Peckinpah, The young director was passionate but unknown, and trouble followed the shoot from the start. MGM planned to film in the stunning Mammoth Lakes, but bad weather forced him to relocate to Bronson Canyon near Los Angeles. The last-minute move was a disaster. Peckinpah, furious with the studio, made the cast and crew drink their frustrations away during the 6-hour bus ride. When MGM president Joseph Vogel watched an early cut, he reportedly fell asleep. When he woke up, he called it the worst movie he had ever seen. MGM gave the film zero support, dumping it onto the bottom of double features across the country. In America, it bombed. But something strange happened overseas. European critics saw it for what it was, a quiet masterpiece. Slowly, Ride the High Country became one of MGM's biggest international hits. Over time, word spread, and what the studio had once written off as a failure became a classic. In 1992, Ride the High Country was officially added to the National Film Registry. What began as a chaotic, nearly forgotten project had transformed into a beloved classic. And at the center of it all stood Randolph Scott, delivering one final, unforgettable performance. Scott played Gil Westrom, an aging ex-lawman trying to find his place in a world that was moving on without him. The story unfolded in 1905, when the Old West was disappearing fast. Trains were replacing horses, and lawmen like Gil were becoming relics. With his rugged face lined by time and truth, Scott looked like he'd stepped out of history. His presence alone carried decades of quiet strength. Westrom was a man split down the middle, between gold and loyalty, greed and honor. And behind the camera, life was quietly imitating art. Scott and co-star Joe McCrea weren't just acting. They were living legends nearing their own twilight years. That unspoken truth gave the film a heavy, haunting power. You could feel it in every scene. Lucien Ballard's cinematography sealed it. His soft golden autumn tones made the entire movie feel like a slow goodbye. But it wasn't just a farewell to the frontier. It was a farewell to the entire era of classic Hollywood westerns. This wasn't just another cowboy shootout. It had heart. It had soul. And Randolph Scott gave one of the most emotional performances of his life. Maybe even the best. He showed everything: pride, pain, confusion, and a sliver of hope, all without raising his voice. It wasn't a loud goodbye. It was the kind that stays with you. Scott felt it too. After the film wrapped, he quietly walked away from acting forever. He didn't want to fade into weak parts or become a background figure in someone else's movie. He had said all he needed to say through Gil Westrom. That performance held it all: regret, redemption, and one final dose of grit. Scott told friends, "I'll never top this." So he didn't even try. He left on his own terms. But Scott wasn't just smart in front of the camera. Off-screen, he played a whole different game, and played it better than almost anyone else in Hollywood. When he retired in 1962, he didn't disappear. He turned his sharp focus to business, and quietly built a fortune. By the mid-1960s, his net worth had soared to $100 million. That's nearly $280 million today. While other stars bought flashy cars or beach houses, Scott bought land, and lots of it. He made huge investments in the San Fernando Valley and Palm Springs, long before those places exploded in value. By 1965, those real estate holdings alone were worth over $100 million. He saw the boom coming before anyone else. And he didn't stop there. Back in 1927, Scott helped create the Park Ridge Country Club in Corona, California. It later became Cresta Verde, one of the oldest golf courses in America. But it wasn't just for fun. Stars like Lucille Ball, Burt Lancaster, and Clark Gable played there, turned the course into a celebrity hotspot. Scott loved the game, but he loved the business even more. He knew how to blend passion and profit like few ever could. When Randolph Scott passed away in 1987, he left behind more than a film legacy. He left behind an empire. His fortune still sat around $100 million, even decades after retiring. By comparison, Cary Grant's estate was worth about $130 million today. Katharine Hepburn's was around $30 million. Scott's numbers were in a class of their own, but his final years were tough. The cowboy who had once ridden across dusty landscapes with perfect posture began to slow down. He developed heart problems and had trouble breathing. Pneumonia hit more than once. By early 1987, he was weak and required full-time care. On March 2nd, 1987, Randolph Scott died quietly in his sleep at his Beverly Hills home. Just a quiet goodbye for a man who had lived and ended his story on his own terms.